Hey, this is Andrew Nemec with the Oregonian and OregonLive, joined as always by Eforce football coach slash high school football guru in the state of Oregon, Jordan Johnson. Jordan, thanks for being here. Back from Vegas.
Yes, sir.
Eforce football after I don't think there's any other way to put it, a rough showing against Ford Sports and kind of a tune-up for you guys, a postseason type of situation for them. You guys bounced back and actually finished higher than they did in the tournament. You made it to the Sweet 16, finished 11th in the country. I'm just going to give the floor to you. I wasn't there. What did you see? Obviously, improvements were made.
Yeah, so, our kids, first of all, credit to our kids, coaching staff. Everybody really, really showed up. Basically, if you saw that FSP matchup, this was the complete opposite. So, pool play games, we go 3-0, win 2 in overtime. We played well, but we could play better. And then we came into that second day firing on all cylinders. Game 5 and 6 definitely did what we needed to do. And won that 20-19 really close ball game to get us into the Sweet 16, and then unfortunately dropped a team out of the Inland Empire. But overall, the kids played very well. 11th in the country. Ford Sports ended up 15th, and I think a lot to be proud of.
Ford Sports, really talented club, just went up against the juggernaut and lost, but another quality team. I think once again, Oregon, Washington showing that Northwest football's on the rise. Speaking of that, it seemed like a number of prospects potentially helped their stock, including a couple who have already added offers since just this past weekend. Who stood out to you and who raised their stock?
Elijah Molden did his thing. He allowed one complete pass in the entire tournament. Anthony Adams was on fire. He did more probably than any other athlete that we had, potential MVP for the tournament. Connor Neville went off, 17 TDs, 3 picks, hit 7 different receivers for touchdowns on the first day, and he definitely helped himself out with regards to recruiting. Daniel Green was nice. He was that guy that he's so big in the middle, and having to cover those small backs in a 7-on-7 setting, that's tough. So he really showed off that overall athleticism that you need, that they're kind of saying, okay, does he have that? And he left no doubt.
Daniel Green's a kid who still is unrated, I think, by every major recruiting service. I don't think Rivals or Scout or anybody have him as a 3-star yet. I think he's going to end up being a 4-star and a top 100 prospect. It's going from will he get a few offers to will he get a few of those big-time offers. We're talking about at this point maybe Alabama, maybe Michigan, Ohio State. Oregon's knocking on the door at this point. It wouldn't shock me if we look down his list of offers and we see 15 top 25 programs by the time it's all said and done. The thing I was worried about with Daniel Green is he's so big, he's so physical, that I was worried he was maybe going to get a personal foul penalty in a 2-hand touch type of league, just because he sometimes doesn't know how quick and aggressive he can be on the field, that he was going to just destroy somebody just getting hands on him, because he's such a big kid. He's a legit 6'3", 230. Sounds like he didn't have problems with that. One of the other guys that jumped out and has really picked up his recruitment, Scout moved him from completely off the radar, off the grid, to a 3-star prospect. He's visiting Washington as we speak. Madison wide receiver Isaiah Mullen, all of 6'4", 190. We've talked about him on the podcast probably like a year ago at the Rose City Rumble 7-on-7, and he was a kid who'd quit football, come back to be with Don Johnson. He didn't block well. He didn't run very good routes. But even then, we had said, if this kid is willing to put in the work, if he gets it together, if he puts it all together academically, on the field, learns to do the little things, he could blow up. To his credit, he's done that. He's put together those ball skills, elite ball skills, to go up and get the ball, soft hands in a 6'4", 190 frame, and combined that with some of the little things, he's going to end up maybe being a Pac-12 player. Now, having come from being off the radar 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, Isaiah showed up, 3 touchdowns on the second day. He had that one-handed grab that most people saw. He's literally pushing 6'5", first-team all-league wide receiver, as we talked about up at Washington on an unofficial today. So, he's drawing interest from some of the Pac-12 and other mid-major type schools right now. So you can only imagine moving forward, especially with all of his intangibles, as big of his upside, because he hasn't played football his entire life. He's one of the more talented basketball kids in Portland, just a phenomenal overall athlete, and credit to Washington, because right now they're killing it recruiting wise, getting an Isaiah Molden kid early, kind of taking an early projection on him and saying, look, we like this kid. And if they go first, I mean, I really think Isaiah will consider that.
Speaking of going first and where kids will go, I want to do it way too early. It's way too early. Prediction piece on where all of the top players in Oregon will go. There are like 14 or 15 that could end up in the Pac-12. I want to do a prediction for all of them. We'll have a slideshow with predictions to come on the same day as the podcast is released. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I think we're probably going to be wrong on a number of these guys. But I also think that there are some real clear early signs with a few of these guys that it's worth doing. Number one guy on most people's boards in the state of Oregon, Westland corner, Elijah Molden. I think everyone thinks it's a done deal, and they're wrong. You talk to Elijah, you talk to his dad, you talk to anybody around Elijah, and it's a tougher decision than he's all Oregon. I would put in very soft pencil, I would put in Oregon, but if I had to say right now where he'd choose, I think he chooses Stanford. I think he has some questions about what that scheme's going to look like at Oregon. I think Elijah and his dad have some concerns about Oregon giving up 37 points a game last year on defense. And I think if he had to pick a school today, I think he'd sign and commit to Stanford. My prediction to Oregon is based on the fact that I think Oregon's going to be better. I think they're going to clean things up, and I think they're going to do a better job under Brady Hoke of making those corners, putting them in a position to succeed versus putting them in a zone where they have to sit back and kind of guesstimate where guys are going to be. It's not a bad system. It's just not an aggressive system, and I think under Hoke they're going to correct some of that. Where do you see Molden going?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say anywhere else other than Oregon, although I really think they're going to seriously look at Stanford among others because he's going to get some big-time offers. I mean, he's going to get some Notre Dames and a few other big-time offers. He's legitimately one of the top players in America, all positions considered. He's a 4-star. I think he should probably be a 5-star. That's my personal opinion. But I think Elijah is just – I think he is going to continue to just get better and better with his work ethic, and just he's one of the most grounded kids you'll ever meet. So – I'll go Oregon, but at the same time, I'm telling you, and I know you would probably agree that he's going to get some pretty huge offers coming up here.
Interest from Florida State, LSU, Notre Dame. I know Notre Dame in particular, he's mentioned as a school that really interests him. That fight is not over, and I think if Oregon has a bad year on the field on the defensive side of the ball, I would just safely say if Oregon plays poorly on the defensive side of the ball next year, he will not go to Oregon.
Agreed.
Marlon Tuipulotu, central defensive tackle, 4-star, already offers from USC, Oregon, Oregon State, I think Washington, Cal, starting to hear from schools around the country. He's another one of those kids that's really tough to project this early where he'll go because you could easily see him getting Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, LSU. Everything is on the board. He's the number 5, number 6 defensive tackle in the country. So he's a kid that has 9 more months from a small school. Teams are going to become more aware of him, and he's going to have a number of offers. As is, I think he's really excited about Oregon. And he's said he's been down to Oregon. He likes Oregon. He feels comfortable there. He went to the basketball game against Washington just a couple weeks ago, the day after he won the state championship in 5A at the heavyweight division in wrestling. I think he's finding a comfort zone, and I think he's a small-town kid who wants to stay near home. I feel pretty comfortable projecting him to Oregon. Now, he could obviously be blown away by a late LSU offer or something like that, but I feel pretty strongly that he's going to end up at Oregon. Jordan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Marlon will end up being one of the most special kids to come out here ever, regardless of position. I mean, I'm thinking the Ndamukong Suh Haloti Ngata type kid. I mean, he is so good, so dominant. Anybody can watch this film and see it for themselves. You know, don't take it from me. I mean, I do agree with you 100%. I think he'll stay close to home. I just feel like that's the type of kid that he is. Super good kid, like, you know, incredibly respectful, and I think that'll be a big score because that's a 5-star D tackle.
Yeah, he certainly has the potential to be a 5-star. I'd love for him to be a kid that gets a shot at the opening because I don't think, particularly being at Central High School, I don't think he gets to go up against the best players in the country very often, on top of being from Oregon. I would love to see him at the opening finals because I think he'd really, among all the players we talk about, he'd be the guy that exposure would just rise his stock even further.
Great.
Madison linebacker Daniel Green, we're starting to see him pop. I know Oregon's very much on the radar at this point. Offers from Oregon State, Cal, Colorado, Washington State. Daniel Green is still not rated, and I think he's going to end up being a high 4-star. Alabama coaches are following him on Twitter at this point. I think it's possible. Now, it's really early. I think it's possible Alabama offers him. I think it's in play. And I don't even know if the state's really prepared for that yet. I still get messages and emails and comments on stories that, hey, I don't see it with Daniel Green. And then you just don't get it. Sorry. I mean, he's really talented. He's 6'3", 230, highly productive, so it's not a projectable thing. He's already dominant. If I had to guess right now, Daniel Green does want to stay in the Northwest. He's talked about that. So I would say it's going to be between Washington and Oregon. Those are the two schools he really likes, and he's mentioned that. But if Alabama were to offer, I think he'd go to Alabama. That being said, I'm going to pick Daniel Green to Washington. I think he wants to get out of the state and get another opportunity somewhere else. But it wouldn't shock me if he picked Oregon. So Washington in pencil with Oregon right in the mix, and then obviously if the dream Alabama offer comes, which it could, Alabama. Your thoughts?
I think if he's not a 3-star yet, I think that's where they're going to have him at like tomorrow, and then potentially moving up to a 4-star shortly. That's my understanding. Regardless of the stars, the kid's legit every which way. It's hard. Once again, this is another tough one to say as of right now because he could foreseeably have half the country, everyone before all is said and done. That's one thing that's crazy is all these kids and the offers that they have. You go back even 1 year, and no one had as good a class as we had last year. Nothing was like this. The offers have jumped dramatically.
That's a great point because you look, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but we look at Lamar Winston. I don't think he had an offer at this point, maybe one. Brady Breeze had 2, and basically no one else had anything on the radar. This year we've got, 14 kids, I'm looking at my list right now, with an offer already. So we're predicting, if we were going to do this last year, we'd be like, Lamar Winston, no offers. Who knows? Maybe Oregon, maybe. Or maybe he had Oregon State at that point, so maybe we would have said Oregon State. But after that, Michigan, USC, most of the Pac-12, Cam McCormick, it blew up. Michigan, UCLA, Oregon State. So we're predicting guys a year ago, we wouldn't have even been able to begin to do this. It's just because so many early offers have come in that we're giving it a shot. And I feel like we're going to get about 60% of these kids right, and then there's going to be 40 that we miss on. But as you were saying with Daniel Green, sorry to interrupt, but go ahead again with Daniel Green, my bad.
No, just with the Alabama reference, that's like real. That is, they actually are very interested. And when they're interested, everyone else becomes interested. So,
right.
Before all is said and done, we're going to see him receive offers outside of the Pac-12 and probably some very, very well-known schools in the SEC or ACC or what have you. So I think, and Daniel's a phenomenal kid. For anybody that doesn't know him, when you get to know him, just like, super nice kid on the field, incredibly aggressive, and will track you down and take care of business.
Nice kid.
Yeah.
On the field.
On the field, he's
a monster.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to mess with him or go over the middle against him, frankly. Although I wouldn't want to go over the middle against most of these kids.
In Vegas, I really think he helped his stock because, once again, you could see him. You get exposed in the middle of the field if a big linebacker and you got a little slot coming out of there or a little running back that's all quick. And he was tracking people down as big as he is, 6'3", 230, 235, and did a phenomenal job. Barely allowed a couple passes on him all turning.
The other piece with Daniel is he is still projected to grow and is still growing. And he's a kid who could end up very easily. Right now he's a pretty big middle linebacker who's pretty agile. He could easily gain and grow 20 pounds, 2 inches, and now we're looking at 6'5", 250 and moves like he does, and then what do we even do with that? So Daniel Green's really hard to predict. Like I said, Washington for me, with Oregon right there, and then obviously if the Alabama offer, Ohio State comes in, then it opens the door.
I'll go Oregon, and I'll also say he could be 6'5" with his hand on the ground before all is said and done. You just don't know. His brother's 6'9", so the range there is you just don't know.
Sherwood linebacker David Morris. Now, I've gotten a lot of tips from you on being at camp saying check this guy out. David Morris is one guy that I found on my own. You don't get any credit, Jordan. I saw him as the third string running back for Sherwood and went up to him after the game and just said, dude, you're going to be a player. There's no doubt. And he's turned into one. He's 6'3", 210. He could easily be 6'3", 220, 225 early in college. I like him as an outside linebacker. I think he's going to be really talented there, but he's mobile enough, and some schools are even talking about, even at 6'3", 210, that he could potentially play some safety. He's that quick, sideline to sideline. He's an impressive specimen. Offers from Cal, Oregon State. I'm kind of blanking, to be honest with you, on all his offers, but go ahead.
Hawaii, Colorado
There
State.
we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
He's got a bunch of them. David Moore is a kid that I think he's looking at his education as well as football, and I think if he's going off his offers now, I think Cal. I could see Washington jumping into the mix and being a school that he goes to. But if I had to project to him right now, I would say Cal. And again, now we're getting down this list, and we have not projected a kid to Oregon State. And I feel very comfortable that none of the guys above him at this point are going to go to Oregon State, just having spoken to those guys. And I think David Morris is the first one who's a maybe, but I think he's going to pick somewhere that is an elite academic institution.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to have 9 or 10 schools out of the Pac-12. Look how early it is right now. And I think he's also going to have a Michigan. He's going to have a couple big schools from across the country. I think he's that talented. Playing safety, I mean, he projects probably more as a backer, but from his safety spot, he covers so much ground. His overall athleticism, for as big as he is, he can play free, strong, outside backer. He can play a host of different positions. He can play offense. He's gonna average 20 yards a touch next year. So
easily.
When you think of Ryan Nall killing it at Oregon State, I kind of use that reference because they're very similar in size. David is another kid that I think I wouldn't be surprised to see the Ducks on him sometime shortly.
And I think if Oregon were to offer, I don't know that that's a done deal, but I think there's a good chance he'd end up at Oregon. I don't know if they're going to go on him. If they, it's funny because you look at a guy like Daniel Green and it's like, well, if Daniel Green were to go somewhere else, Oregon would still have a need at linebacker, but they landed 7 different guys who could potentially play linebacker last year. So there aren't very many spots. So it'll be interesting to see how they project David, to see if they go on him. As is prediction, where do you think? Sorry.
Oregon.
Okay. Quarterback. You're like rubbing your head like, how are we doing this? Scout 4-star quarterback Connor Neville has offers from Washington State and Boise State. And quarterback is really one of those positions where you need to commit now early. We looked at the Elite 11 roster last year of 18 or 19 guys. I always forget the number. But all but 2 of them were committed, and that was July. He's going to have to make a decision sooner rather than later because that's what happens with quarterbacks. I could see a couple more offers coming in for him, and I think they could. He blew up at the Pylon 7-on-7, but I think he's going to have to commit early. So I'm going to say that he ends up at Boise State and wants to go somewhere with his brother. If he and his brother decide to go separate, I think he goes to Washington State.
Connor went off this past weekend. I mean, when you talk about a kid catching fire, seeing that composure, just that overall confidence, he was doing that against the other top quarterbacks from around the country. Tate Martell, we played the number 5 ranked kid from Dallas-Fort Worth. Connor looked better than most of the QBs there. So once again, it's going to depend a lot on I think this offseason and kind of what he does on the national circuit with his last weekend kind of being a launching point for him. He could potentially add some offers early, but I 100% agree with you that entertaining an early commitment wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing, not because of his talent or what have you, but just because I really like Boise State and Washington State for him. I think they both fit him well, great coaching. I would definitely entertain those. And Connor's a smart kid. I think I think he'll be able to kind of self-assess and see, both those schools for what they are. I think they're both really good options.
Jesuit offensive lineman, probably a left tackle, maybe a right tackle, 6'7", 300-pound Jackson Kirkland. His dad played for Washington. I think he's definitely on that spectrum. I mean, he definitely could play at that level. I think he will be recruited at that level. And I think if Washington offers, that's going to be a hard one for him to turn down. It's not to say he couldn't go to Oregon or Oregon State, but I think if Washington offers, I think they have big time their foot in the door. And I wouldn't say that's a guarantee by any stretch. But of all the guys on this list, I feel the most comfortable that if he were to get that offer, that would be where he would end up.
Yeah, I mean it's also a very good academic school, and it's hard to be where your dad went, Rose Bowl and so on. So I definitely agree with you on that point. Jackson's a kid. Once again, he could end up with a plethora of schools outside of the Pac-12 offering him. I mean, is what he did that second half of this last year with his ability to move being that big at 6'7", 305. You have to really say to yourself, okay, he's got these offers right now. What's it going to be like in 2 or 3 months after the camp circuit and so on, when people are really taking a look? And like we've talked about, I think he's a kid that could have some big-time national elite offers.
Well, he's got the offer from Oregon State. I know that Oregon's talking to him at this point. He's told me that at this point Oregon's talking to him a little bit. You don't know if an offer is going to come, but you have to feel like if they're willing to talk to him this early and there's dialogue going on, that there's at least some interest there. But I think it's going to be Washington. Westland offensive lineman Alex Forsythe, the most offered offensive player in the state. And I have to say, credit to Alex. He did it right. He did it right from the beginning. He got on Twitter. He followed coaches. He created a film that was front-loaded with his best plays, and he sent it to all the coaches he followed that would follow him back or talk to him in any capacity. And you ask him, what worked for you? What's working for you that's not working for other guys? And he said, I became my biggest advocate. And I think people assume that coaches are going to find you. That's not how it works. He's gone out, followed a ton of coaches, created a great huddle film, and had a plan and pursued. And that's why he's got all these offers. One of the offers he has is from Oregon. He's got an offer from Oregon State. I think of anybody on the list, he is the one I feel the best about total. I think he's going to end up at Oregon. I think Oregon's going to get themselves a quality lineman, versatile lineman, who can play potentially a lot of different positions, and even before he's a starter, add depth at right tackle, either guard spot, and maybe even some center. I really like him as a piece that's versatile along an offensive line.
Yeah, I would once again agree. I mean, I just can't see Alex sitting on Oregon for too long. I mean, not that he couldn't get plenty of other offers, but it seems like such a good fit for him. And I can't say enough good things about Alex Forsythe. I mean, separate from football, just a phenomenal kid. And Oregon, as we go down this list, Oregon could have one of the most special recruiting classes they've ever had, and most of it could be in-state if these kids decide to go that route. I mean, they're going to have plenty of other options, but as you're going down this, I mean, they legitimately could have 7 or 8 3, 4, 5-star kids in the state of Oregon, which,
right,
as far as I know, that's never happened before. So, I just think it's really intriguing, and maybe as this process kind of continues, as they see kids commit to Oregon, that will entice others. So, from a strategy standpoint, I mean, this could be a special year within state.
Speaking of Oregon, Jesuit cornerback Demetrius Douglas, early offers from a number of schools. I know Harvard just expressed a heavy interest in him. To me, it seems like a battle between Oregon, the in-state program, and Minnesota. His dad's an alumni from Minnesota. I'll let you lead it off. Where do you see him going?
I mean, he's a high-end academic kid, a 3.75 with AP classes at a private school. So that is, it's enticing. He's a really well put together kid. His dad Omar was a standout at the University of Minnesota, and then he went on to play in the NFL for 5 years. So that is another option with those ties. But with the, once again, Oregon offer, it's just hard for me, regardless of who you are, to just sit on something that nice for an extended period of time. I mean, how long is that going to stay open for anyone? So Demetrius is a freak. I mean, his hips, his ability to, how fluid he is. I mean, he's the real deal. And once again, if you have Elijah, Demetrius, and some of these guys in the same defensive backfield, assuming that's what they would play, I think this could be super special. So I'll say Oregon. I just have a hard time seeing something kind of better than that.
Yeah, I think that Minnesota offer might be tough to turn down. That being said, I always lean towards a kid staying close to home if the most successful on-field program in that state has offered. If a kid's from Seattle or anywhere in Washington and they get the University of Washington offer, even if they get that offer from Michigan or wherever, you kind of tend to lean that way. If a kid in California gets the Stanford or USC offer, you tend to lean that way versus he's going to go to Michigan, he's going to go to, he's going to leave the state. So I'll say Demetrius Douglas to Oregon, knowing full well that Minnesota is going to make a really strong push for a quality kid. He could actually be the headliner if he ends up going to Minnesota and being the best prospect they get. I can't imagine that they're competing against top 10, top 15 programs for a lot of kids. And Demetrius, obviously, with the offer from Oregon, would be that kid. Sheldon offensive lineman Cody Shear is picking up some offers. He added Toledo on Thursday. He has offers from Hawaii, Nevada, Ohio, Idaho. Where do you see Cody Shear ending up?
I mean, he's another kid that's just, his stock keeps going up and up. He's all 6'4", 280, moves super, super well. Right now he does have mid-major offers. So if he gets a couple Pac-12s, it kind of opens up everything else. I mean, he's another kid, if we're talking about self-promotion, he's done a very, very good job of saying, look, I am a D1 kid, here I am, and getting his video out, and it's worked, much like Alex. So to both of their credit, being proactive and a lot of times doing what you need to do in the Northwest. As you and I know, 2 Sundays ago, we were out in the pouring rain with the top 10 linemen in the state, and we talked about that. Credit to you guys for being here early on a Sunday morning in bad weather. When you have plenty of offers, you could be doing a lot of other things or just chilling, and instead you're out here working with Alex Linenkohl. So it says a lot about kids like Cody, Alex, Jackson, other kids that are making that extra effort.
I'm torn with Cody because it's so hard to project school interest that isn't there right now. But one of the things that Washington State likes to do is create a pretty wide gap between their offensive linemen. They don't pack them in. It's a very different look where they put a little gap between them. A guy like Cody Shear, who's really athletic and mobile, is the perfect kind of guard for that situation. I'm going to project Cody Shear gets an offer from Washington State because of his athleticism, because of his flexibility, and because of his versatility. I think the way Washington State asks its guys to pass block is a really good fit for what he does.
And I would go, maybe this is the first guy that Oregon State gets out of this group, because I don't think any of these ones that we spoke to that prior, they're going to get those 8 kids before that. So, Cody's right there. I think Washington State would be a good fit. Oregon State, stay at home. So I think he will end up with a couple Pac-12s. That's where I would go with that.
Yeah. Central Catholic offensive lineman. Central Catholic was like all we talked about last year, and this year they're down the list a little bit, in part because they don't have the same guys. I mean, those guys are gone, and they struggled on the field a little bit last year. Travis McKay was not the reason. 6'6", 275, 280-pound tackle. Incredibly long and has so much potential to add 40, 50 pounds and still be comfortable. He's a project, but I think he's a project you want to have because his ceiling is so high. I really like Travis. I think Travis is going to get a late offer from Oregon State because I see Alex Forsythe choosing Oregon. I see Jackson choosing Washington. As we've talked about, we see a number of guys choosing places away from Oregon State. So I think they need to get some guys, and I think Travis is a perfect Oregon State guy. They can build him up, and he's potentially an all Pac-12 body. It's just that it's going to take some development. What do you see with Travis?
I think even more than, upside-wise, just because of his body. He is all 6'6", and athletic, 270, what have you, can play defense, shows off his overall athleticism on the defensive side of the ball. So I couldn't agree with you more. And Oregon State, I think it would be a great fit, but he's another kid, I think, with the camp circuit coming up, everything in June, as long as he does things right, just looking at, they can turn him into a certain type of kid just based on his sheer size and overall athleticism. So Oregon State as a safety bet, but I think he could even grab a top 20, top 15 school.
I agree. And what people don't often see from linemen, what he brings that people don't often see, 6'6" and pretty dang mobile. And I was talking to Alex Linenkohl, and he said, if Travis had really good ball skills, where he had soft hands and had all that, now he's more of a lineman, but he said the way he moves is kind of like a tight end, and he's 6'6", 175. If you can put 40 pounds on that, and he gets a little stiffer, but he's 6'6", 315, and pretty flexible and pretty mobile, that's suddenly you've got yourself a really nice frame for a big-time tackle. So I think he's a guy who could really blow up. And I think of all the guys on this list, he's the guy whose first 4 or 5 games of that senior film are really going to matter. And you could see him really surge, similar to how some guys did late last year and picked up a number of offers, and you saw things really steamroll for them in December and January. He's a guy I'll be looking for in December and January to see things really change for him.
Credit to Wyoming coming in and offering. I kind of feel bad because it seems like they jump on these talented kids early.
Wyoming's done a great job.
They have done. Pete Caligus is one of the best people you ever meet, and he does a lot of the recruiting for them, especially in the Northwest. And a kid like Travis, give him that offer. I mean, there's other kids that they probably should have offered earlier too, but it seems like Wyoming's the first offer for a lot of kids, and then obviously they blow up and do other things. But yeah, a lot of credit to the Cowboys.
Central Catholic, tight end, defensive end, linebacker is where he projects in college. It's not necessarily where he played for Central Catholic, but Malik Thirdgill. I love Malik Thirdgill. I love that he's 6'4", all of 230, bruiser, moves well. Similar, I guess, to Ryan Nall in that he's versatile and can do so many different things, but I think whereas Nall projects really, obviously, he's become an offensive guy, I think Malik fits more on defense. And maybe he ends up being a tight end, but I kind of see him playing defense. I really like Malik Thirdgill to Oregon State. I think that's a valuable piece for them. I think his versatility is great. I think he's from a big-time program. Oregon State likes to get kids that win. They like that, bringing in that winning tradition. And I think Malik is a winner, and I think he's going to go to Oregon State in the end.
Yeah, it'll be interesting where they end up having him. He played only tight end last year, didn't play defense, was an all-conference tight end, but I think we both see him more as an outside backer, a kid that moves incredibly well, especially for as big as he is. You watch him on the basketball floor, and you see a very athletic kid. So, once again, I think good call on your part. I mean, Oregon State would be Cody Shear, Malik Thirdgill. One of these guys will potentially be the first Beaver, although Malik, I think, once again, will be another kid as he gets out on the circuit. Just spoke with him a few days ago. Basketball just ended, so he's going to be coming out and playing on 7-on-7.
Oh, that'll be good.
Yeah, so people can see him live. So he's another kid that could blow up shortly, and, with all the intangibles he has, we'll see this offseason.
I'm just kind of almost doing this by ranking. So the next guy on the list is Tim Tawa. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on him. It's become clear in the past 2-3 months that it sounds like he's pretty committed to Stanford baseball. Now, if he could end up playing quarterback at Stanford, great, and he's certainly not going to just say, hey, don't recruit me for football, because he's still a football prospect. But I think he sees Stanford, not only the education, but the opportunity to play baseball as kind of the pinnacle of where he could go. And unless Stanford comes through and say, hey, come and play football here too, I just see him ending up playing baseball at Stanford. I think that's where he fits, and it's no discredit to what he is because he's extremely talented. That's what he wants, and I think that's where he's going to end up. He's already committed there.
Yeah, so, I don't foresee him going anywhere other than Stanford, but hypothetically speaking, he could play Pac-12 football somewhere. I think he's that good. Maybe not as your first scholarship guy or what have you, but Timmy's the exception to the rule when it comes to just being a flat-out baller. 50 TDs, 3 picks, 4,420 yards. Granted, yeah, it's Oregon 6A football, but he's that kid that just is good at whatever he does, and he probably won't play QB at Stanford, but could he? I think he could be he could if that was his first passion. So Stanford baseball.
Madison wide receiver Isaiah Mullen. He's at Washington on Thursday. I don't know if the Pac-12 is going to pop. It could, and he's one of those guys you almost have to do best case scenario, not worst case, but kind of what he's in line for if he doesn't continue to develop. And I think best case scenario for me, I love the type of receiver he is at Washington State. I think Washington State does a phenomenal job with big receivers. Mike Leach loves to throw the football. It wouldn't shock me even a little bit, as long as he continues to develop, that he goes to Washington State and ends up being an 1,100-yard, 12-touchdown receiver at Washington State. He's got amazing ball skills in the air. They know exactly what to do with a guy like that in the red zone. That's where he thrives. He's the best red zone target this state has produced in, 4 or 5 years? I would love to see him at Washington State. He could go to Washington. That makes sense. I get it. But I really think Mike Leach knows what to do with a big receiver with good hands. I've seen it firsthand because I covered him for 2 years. I'd love to see that. on the current projection, I think Eastern Washington.
I'm gonna go UW. I think he'll be another guy that blows up. I mean, we see where he's going. Yet he doesn't have an offer yet, but I mean, it's
a matter of time.
Could be tomorrow, could be in a week. It's coming shortly. So, currently visiting UW, and I think he's genuinely likes that school. And as we talked about, credit to the Huskies for kind of getting on him early and seeing what he brings to the table, because he isn't a kid that's played a ton of football in his life, and his upside is ridiculous.
Mason Elliott, wide receiver out of Westview. I'll let you go first on Mason Elliott.
Yeah, I mean, Mason's anybody that watched him play this last year, you see a kid that's 6'3", $180, that can run, that got that early Idaho offer, but haven't necessarily seen him out at workouts a ton. He's been playing basketball, so I think once we'll see on him. He has the next 3-4 months to kind of get out on the circuit and do his thing at different camps, get himself exposure, and he has all the tools. I'll stay in the mid-major arena with him, mid-major / Big Sky. He does have the size and potential though to blow up like a lot of these kids that we've talked about, because I mean, once again, as we go through this recruiting class, I really feel, I don't think this will probably go down as the best recruiting class we've ever had in the state of Oregon.
And I think it could it could stay that way for a long time. 2018 is really good too, but I don't know if they have this depth. And for a long time we said, not sure the depth is there in this class, but they have the star power with Elijah and Marlon. And credit to these guys, particularly the offensive linemen, have come up, and suddenly they've added 4 or 5 Pac-12 guys where we didn't necessarily see them. You talked to Lennon Cole about some of these linemen that he saw in the 8th grade, and he said they were guys that were out working with me, but you can see even in the 8th grade, that kid's going to be a stud lineman. He said a number of these kids weren't necessarily that guy. They worked themselves into that guy. And I think the same goes for what you guys have done with Eforce. Some of these guys were talented, but you didn't say, well, like Daniel Green, his grades need to get figured out, or he's not going to blow up. And he readily admits that. I'm not trying to throw him under the bus. Isaiah Mullen quit football, so maybe he doesn't work out. Anthony Adams, he's kind of a tweener. Where does he work? And all these kids just put in the work together collectively, and they all kind of panned out. It's an amazing accomplishment for the class of 2017, and huge credit to those guys. Speaking of Anthony Adams, I want to get to Anthony Adams because you love Anthony Adams, and I really like Anthony Adams. I'm going to keep saying Anthony Adams. Why don't you go ahead and give me your thoughts on him? He needs to get a big time offer.
Anthony's my guy, man. That kid right there is the next one in line, or should be. James Dockery, NFL vet, Oregon State great, one of our coaches at Eforce, sat there and watched this kid all weekend and is like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, this kid is locked down. Everything about him. He was literally potentially a first-team all-tournament kid along with Elijah and David. I mean, Anthony, for the last 2 years, in 17 games we've played, he's allowed 5 complete passes in the last 2 years in Las Vegas at the national tournament. Helped us to the Final Four and then the Sweet 16 this year. And Anthony, I've been hollering his name for a minute. I get
2
it.
years.
For 2 years.
Maybe more.
But it's coming, man. I mean, and once again, it's still relatively early. In the big scheme of things, this is a very unique class. And Anthony is someone that I think is going to be special, not just a special high school athlete. I think he's going to be a very good college football player. His brother is a 6'3" wide receiver at Portland State, one of the better players in the Big Sky. And Anthony has told me, and I would agree with him, that this Newburgh team they got coming back next year will probably be the best team in school history in a ridiculously tough conference, the TRL, which is like the SEC of Oregon high school football. But Anthony and Newburgh got a shot next year, and he runs the veer. He's a QB in high school, so you're not going to be able to see him in his natural position. But from a defensive standpoint, I think Anthony has as big an upside. I know people would say he's not big enough or what have you, but I think he will go down as one of the better players in Oregon this year.
I have no idea where to project him. It's not even fair because I do have some concerns. I love him as an athlete. I think he's a wonderful kid. I think he's probably 6 foot 160, maybe 165. And I'd like him to be, and I think he's got it in him, to be 6'2", 185, 190. If he can add 15 pounds and he grows, I have no doubt that he's a Pac-12 talent. He's a Pac-12 athlete as is. It's just, will the size come? So it's impossible to project for me. I think he's right in between lower level Pac-12, even now, and kind of the Mountain West. I just randomly am going to throw out Boise State. And the only reason I'm going to throw that out is I think Boise State does a great job of taking kids like that other teams don't necessarily get. They take them and say, we'll build this kid because we love his base, we love his athleticism, or we love his size. We'll teach him the position. And they've done a great job of building those kids up. And I think like Jordan Happel, he's a very good athlete who's a little slept on, and the two of them are going to go together. In my dream scenario is they're a shutdown secondary together for the Broncos.
That's messed up. You just said Jordan. You took that right out of my brain. So yeah, I think that's a perfect example. They got Jordan way late this year, and I think that was a score for Boise. And I think that's something they're on top of and more proactive this year, getting an Anthony Adams, which is very similar to Jordan, maybe different positions a little bit on the corner versus at safety, depending on continued growth. But yeah, agreed, man. I think Boise State would be a great fit, or a school like it, high profile school, somewhat close, mid major. So we'll see. But regardless, credit to whoever gets on him in the near future.
So you got to do your guy and pick him and throw him out there. I'm throwing mine out. Mountain View quarterback Mike Irwin. I have no idea where he's going to go. I don't know if it's going to pop for him at the Big Sky level. I don't know if a Mountain West school is going to get involved. I think he's a kid that's not necessarily between the Pac-12 Mountain West. I think he's more of like a between the Big Sky Mountain West, and you kind of hope a Big Sky team jumps on him. Doesn't have any offers yet, but he was the Conference Player of the Year as a sophomore. Beat out John Bledsoe, they were sophomores then, so there's been development since then. But just to give you an idea, it wasn't that long ago that he was seen as the better player than John Bledsoe, who now has an offer from Northern Arizona, and people think maybe the Pac-12 comes calling for a guy like John Bledsoe. So Mike, having been projected as the better player as a sophomore, I believe he deserves a shot to be a Big Sky quarterback. And I don't know where that's going to be. I would throw out, just because they've done a good job in the past, they have a whole new staff, so who knows. But this is the type of kid that in years past Montana State threw an offer at, and maybe he ends up somewhere like there. My hope is that he's a Big Sky kid and he ends up there.
Yeah, I would go Montana. I think Mike he's got a whip, number one. He can run, number two. I think last time we spoke on him, his last game this year, he ran for 250 yards and 5 touchdowns on top of throwing for 250. So incredibly versatile, as you referenced. A good sized kid, 6'1.5", maybe we'll get to 6'2", something like that. But he's another individual that, hey, Portland State, why don't you take a look, and because this is a guy that I think would do wonders for you, especially here at home. He's a player. I mean, we both saw that this offseason. So they think this is going to be a big year for Mike Irwin.
Perfect segue. You mentioned Portland State. We just went over 15, 16 guys. Jordan, how many of these kids have an offer from Portland State?
That would be 0.
How many of these kids do you think have had regular Twitter contact or some sort of contact? I know it's speculating, but
I don't
few
know.
Maybe?
Yeah, I really have no idea. I don't know of any, so I can't really say either way.
But you're connected. You talk to these kids. How many of these kids have mentioned to you, hey, Portland State's talking to me?
None.
Okay, so my point with all that is really that Portland State needs to wake up. It's getting to the point that I'm glad you did well on the field. I think that's excellent. Start turning it into something. Be a player in your own state. They offered some guys late in this state. Look at Jaden Grant. Jaden Grant was a great player at Wesleyan who came on late. They threw a late offer at him, and I thought that was great. He chose to walk on at Oregon rather than go to Portland State. And Portland State had a great season. They haven't built a brand in this state because they aren't anybody to these kids in this state. And I don't mean they're not anybody, like they're nobodies. I mean, to these kids, they're not a school that's on the radar. They're not a school that's talking to them. They're not on these kids' radar as a program that's involved or interested. Get interested. Get involved. There's no excuse for not throwing an offer at Malik Thirdgill right now. There's no excuse for not offering Travis McKay, Cody Shear, Anthony Adams, whose brother goes to Portland State. There's no excuse. And there's no question Anthony Adams would really quickly be a stud at Portland State, one of their best players. And instead, they're going to sleep and sleep and sleep. And I'm tired of them hitting the snooze button. Wake up. start offering some of these kids because there's no excuse. And you want to go on signing day and say, hey, we missed on Tally. Hey, we didn't get Happel. We didn't get Jaden Grant. We didn't get, there were a nut, Samori Torrey, Connor Christ. We didn't get those guys. Well, you know why you didn't get them? Because you weren't involved at this point. When we're doing this podcast now, and all these kids are raking in offers, and we didn't mention Portland State once, talking about the top 15. If I'm Portland State, and I mentioned this on Canzano's show, if I'm Portland State, I am the school that's the first to offer everybody. I offer Elijah as a freshman or sophomore, just because the very first time you ever hear Elijah Molden prospect, you also hear Portland State. Marlon Tuipulotu could have offered him a year ago, easily. And it would have been, Marlon could have said, the first time I ever knew I was a player, I heard it from Portland State. And no, they don't get those guys. But it trickles down, and you have Elijah talking about Portland State. I'm suddenly writing Elijah Molden's first offer from Portland State. Because if they put guys on the map, I'm going to write about it. It's going to be out there. Other people will write about it. Instead, they're not doing it. They're not getting mentioned. And these kids don't really know anything about Portland State.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to the kids that they have recruited this past year out of state. I mean, maybe they end up being gems or what have you. But an Anthony Adams reference, for example, his brother is one of your better players. Stand-up, great kid, great family. Anthony Adams is going to be a mid-major Pac-12 kid. But, like you said, just tell me why. I would be curious as to why you haven't offered Anthony right now.
Isaiah Mullen. He's from Portland.
From Portland, yeah. So, I mean, maybe there's a method to the madness, but I don't know. I mean, especially when this is potentially the best recruiting class ever to come out of the state of Oregon. We'll see when all is said and done. But as of right now, looking at these kids, it very well could be.
And I would love to. At this point, I'd love to hear from a Portland State coach about what the philosophy is. Because it's not like they're cleaning up in California. They might be doing a good job. I mean, they've clearly done a good job with players from 2 and 3 years ago. But when Barnum says on signing day, we missed on Oregon kids, he was willing to say, and credit to him, he was aware of it. We missed on Oregon kids. Well, how do you fix it? What's your plan to fix it? Because it's all fine and good to say on signing day, hey, we missed on these kids. It's a whole other thing to say, hey, we're going to be proactive about fixing this. And I'm telling you right now, I wrote a column about it last year. It's going to be a problem. They're not doing what they need to do. And a lot of people said, look at their roster. They've got a number of Oregon kids. And I said, they're not doing what they need to do on the recruiting front to land these kids. Fast forward to signing day, they said, hey, we missed. I'm saying it again. You're not doing what you need to be doing. Let's fast forward to signing day. We'll look at signing day a year from, in February. And I almost guarantee you that we say missed opportunity by Portland State.
Well, you can say, okay, you're not going to get any of these 15 kids right here, and then you take kids 16 through 25 that will potentially go elsewhere because they'll blow up over the next 6 months or year. So if you're getting kids 28 through 32 or in that range from within your own state, I mean, something's not right, So once again, we'll see. Maybe they get some of these top kids, but there hasn't been any offers thus far.
Anthony Adams, Isaiah Mullen, Mason Elliott, Mike Irwin. I would even throw a football offer at Tim Tallett just to have fun with it. Just do it. Why not? I mean, fine, they don't want to, and I wouldn't begrudge them that. But there's some guys for you, Portland State. I would throw an offer at those guys. Based on our projections of where kids are going, Oregon, I would say, a lot of it's gonna come down to Elijah Molden. If they miss on Elijah Molden, it won't just speak to missing on Elijah Molden. It will speak to the fact that the defense isn't doing what it needs to do. Because if the defense plays well next year, I think Elijah will see that as progress and want to be there. And I think if they struggle, Elijah Molden won't go to Oregon. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, think about, just hypothetically, you get Elijah, you get Marlon, Daniel, and David Morris. You get all four of those guys. I mean, the morale within state, I think, would be so, it would be a really good thing for the program, especially all those kids are 3, 4, 5-star kids. I mean,
right.
Those are legit athletes that are going to be nationally recruited, and they are they are nationally recruited.
Right.
So if Oregon grabs those 4 kids who all project on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, you have some serious momentum going into next year.
Right.
You got that hometown flavor, and you probably grab another couple of kids too with Demetrius Douglas and maybe a couple
Alex
more.
Forsythe.
Alex Forsythe. See, that's an incredible recruiting class.
That's a great haul. But what I'm saying is I think they're going to get Marlon. I think they'll get Alex Forsyth. I think they've got a great chance with Demetrius. I think Oregon fans and momentum in the state takes a little bit of a hit, even if they land Marlon and Alex and Demetrius, if they don't get Elijah. Because there's so many people who think Elijah's a done deal. His dad went there. He played in the NFL. And I think, again, if Elijah chooses Oregon, it's going to be in part because Oregon fixed what they needed to fix on defense. Because I'm telling you, he's a little concerned about what happened last year. And everybody is. A little bit concerned about giving up 37 points a game. If they can correct that, not only will it mean that there's progress on the field, but they'll also get Elijah. If they get Elijah, Marlon, either Daniel Green, David Morris, Alex Forsyth, Demetrius Douglas, that's a haul. And I think they should be really proud. If they miss on Elijah and get that same haul, I think it's kind of par for the course.
Yeah, the Ducks are going to have to earn it, and it's not going to be a given. That's what it comes down to. So Elijah just is such a a good kid, such a pure kid. Those Stanfords and Notre Dames, those type of schools are I think going to be. I just type it with Notre Dame. I think they're a team that could offer. So those are other schools that he'll be looking at.
Oregon State, in the class of 2016, offered 8 to 10 guys that offered full rides to 8 to 10 guys. They got one and really didn't have a shot at any of the top 4, top 5 maybe even. If they do what we project them to do again, what does that say about the brand right now for the Beavers?
I mean, it's tough. You really got to, if you're not going to get those kids to build, those in-state top kids, those highly ranked national recruits, you're going to have to go outside of the program, whether it's JC or what have you, do a really good job recruiting, bringing someone in and win. Because the only thing that's going to get you back up into this upper echelon of top recruits is winning, right? You're going to have to entice these kids by the overall, how well the program does. So I think if they don't, once again, which actually if you take the top 10, there's a good chance they might not get any. I mean, they might get one. So you're really going to have to do a good job of maybe getting those next 3 or 4 and turning them into the talented athletes that they could be, or go outside and grab some JC type talent.
I think it's a concern at this point. I don't think they've done a bad job. I think they've been aggressive, but I think they had an opportunity last year to kind of get their feet in the ground and kind of stabilize. And I think Jordan Happel potentially is going to go back, and it's going to end up being a missed opportunity. Jordan wasn't just a player who probably could have and should have been a Pac-12 player, but it would have given Oregon State a foot in the door at Jesuit. And now you're looking at Jackson Kirkland. You're looking at Trey Lowe in 2018. And Jordan, not that Jordan's a selling point necessarily, but Jordan's a leader on that football team. And Jordan's a guy who can show them on their visits, that Oregon State suddenly has a little bit of a pipeline going with Jesuit. They've got Ryan Null, so they've already kind of established Central Catholic through that. And it looks like it may pan out the way we have it projected. We talked about Ryan Null's there. Well, we have Travis McKay and Malik Thirdgill from Central Catholic, both potentially going there. I think Oregon State missed in 2016 an opportunity to get their foot in the door for this class, for next year's class. And I think the fact that they missed in 2016 is going to play into 2017, and they need to work really hard to change the momentum, because I know, and having talked to these kids, that they're not trending in the right direction to land any of the top 5 or 6 players in the state. And you have to battle for the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guy in your state. It can't be a write-off. And I think in some cases, for some of these kids, Oregon State right now is still a write-off, and they've got to change that.
Yeah, if they could grab a Marlon and keep him away from the Ducks,
huge.
That once
Huge.
again, it's a momentum thing. If you see one of those guys go, it really makes the other guys take a second look. So, however you got to do it. I mean, whether it's getting to know that kid, and I know Oregon State offered Marlon early, and it's right there in his backyard. So, I think you're right, and we'll see if they can grab a high-profile recruit or 2, and I think they can call that a big win if they do.
And it's super early. They could easily win some games and turn things around, and I don't have any doubt. I'm just saying where things are trending now, where based on our way too early projections, this would be a big missed year for them. as is, like, they did what they needed to do. They offered David Morris first of the big schools. They offered Daniel Green first of the big schools. They offered Jackson Kirkland really early. They offered Marlin early. They offered Alex Forsythe really early. They did a good job at identifying the talent and offering them early. Total kudos there, because they did a great job. Now it's going to be the difference between offering a guy and getting a guy to commit. And I think there's a gap there right now that they're going to have a hard time filling.
And what I really like is they went out and got Jake Cookus from Hawaii that's come in. He's
Major get.
I mean, Jake is kind of a hometown legend, hero, whatever you want to call it, out of Roseburg back in the day. Won a couple state titles, probably the best team ever to come through here. And then he did very well as a safety at Oregon State. But he is incredibly good on the recruiting front and knows what he needs to be doing within the state and the Northwest in general. So he, I think, is going to be a big-time difference maker for them, and credit to the staff for going and getting him, bringing him home. Those are the type of things that, you really can't put enough emphasis on, because
Right.
I think that creates a huge burst of momentum for them moving forward.
Well, here's what I'll say about that. We have a great view right now of where things would go without Cookus. This is essentially a projection. We know he's there, but without his influence, Oregon State probably misses on the top 7-8 players in this state. It'll be really interesting to see, because I have complete faith in Cookus' ability to recruit the state of Oregon. He did a great job when he was at Hawaii. We're going to really see it if we fast forward 6 months and they land 4, 5, 6 of these guys on this list. You can directly link some of that to Jake Cookus, and obviously that will also mean that they made some progress on the field. But we're really going to get a clear view of the Cookus effect this year, because as it stands right now, they're on the outside looking in. Cookus could be the difference maker.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Jake. I mean, he's won, as a coach and as a player. So I think moving forward, he is going to be that guy that you see kind of be that between the Oregon recruits, those top kids, and whether or not they get them.
Jordan, thanks for being here, man. Got a little bit passionate about Portland State. I have a hard time with it. I've been saying the same thing for 2 years. I'm getting frustrated. But I think that they've got a chance to really turn things around.
7-on-7 wise, just real quickly.
Do it.
Can't say enough good things about all the kids, the families, the coaches, everyone that put in the time. We finished 11th in the nation out of 122 teams. We got a couple tournaments coming up here the next 2 months, San Francisco, up in Tacoma, and then back here in Portland for Memorial Day. But what those kids did, we brought 4 teams out there this last weekend. I think it was, now we've got back-to-back, a Final Four, a Sweet 16, and FSP did really well too. They finished 15th. So 2 teams in the top 15 nationally. I think that's impressive. So we're going to be back at it, and tournaments coming up here, 3 tournaments in the next 2 months. So get out and check it out if you can.
Yeah, it didn't end with the national Pylon 7-on-7 tournament in Vegas. That's the first one of many. Really excited to see where this group goes, because really that was your guys' first quarter of the season. And so it's going to be really interesting. You take it like an NFL season. That was week 1 through 4. We've got still week 5 through 17 to go, and plus playoffs. I think we're going to see a lot of growth, and I think just already we've seen the emergence of Isaiah Mullen, Anthony Adams. We're going to continue to see guys emerge, and it's going to be really exciting to see the offers that come in for some of these kids because of the work they're putting in. Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, brother.